what percentage, I mean, I don't even know if this is like, if there would be data on this, what percentage of autoimmune is nutrition related? I mean, I guess the question is like, are you like, are certain people maybe born with an autoimmune disease? Or is it more they're born with the tendency to lean towards that? And then it's going to be food, environment. You understand
I
the question?
understand exactly what you're saying, and I have a really clear answer. So,
Okay.
some of the work, Dr. Vojjani and others, 20 years ago, showed that there's a triad that's common to all autoimmunity. And when you understand this, I could literally have someone walk into my office with some rare autoimmune disease that I've never seen before, and I'd still know exactly how to treat it, exactly where to go. And part of it is environment and food, and we'll talk about that. First thing is genetics. So there is a genetic predisposition for people to have more proneness to this self-attack, so the body's immune system attacking self. For me, I had a gene called NOD2, which makes me a very high risk for Crohn's disease. And so unbeknownst to me, when that chemotherapy, one of the drugs called Cytoxan actually induces leaky gut or intestinal permeability. And I didn't really know that, but that caused massive damage on my gut lining. And then I had that underlying genetic predisposition. So all of a sudden, the dumping of the bacterial products in my gut lumen into the bloodstream, into the immune system, for me was enough of a trigger to start the cascade of the development of Crohn's disease. So that first thing, genetics. Now, also unbeknownst to me, I had the high risk gene for celiac. So like I said, I was on this totally wrong diet for me because it was high gluten, high carb, worst thing a celiac person could be eating. And I think that was one of the other things that was causing inflammation under the hood of the car before I got diagnosed with Crohn's. But back to the triads, we have that genetic piece, which I certainly had some risk factors, and most people who get autoimmunity have some sort of genetic risk factor. The other part of the triad is one is environmental triggers. This could be things like chemicals, toxins, mold. It could be, food. So if someone has a really bad corn allergy or celiac that's silent, gluten could be a trigger for autoimmunity, as it was in my case. And then the third tier of the triad is the gut immune interface. So it's like Vegas. What happens in the gut stays in the gut, except it doesn't. It's the opposite. What happens on that gut? So basically, our lumen, the gut tube from mouth to anus, basically has an interface. It's our external interface with the environment. It's where our food comes in and the things that we ingest come in. And there's only one cell layer between the gut lumen and the bloodstream. And that's because we need to transport nutrients back and forth. But what can happen is when we have some barrier insult from toxic mold, from chemicals exposure, from me for chemotherapy, or from gluten for me as well, these barriers are impaired, and we call it leaky gut or intestinal hyperpermeability. This is ground zero for autoimmune disease, which means every autoimmune disease has some interface with the gut and the play of that environment or foods, as you mentioned, as triggers, or it could be microbes. And those triggers cross over into the bloodstream and start to trigger this immune cascade that can end up an attack of your thyroid, like Hashimoto's, or in your nerves, like multiple sclerosis, or in your joints, like rheumatoid arthritis. So, like I said, if I know it doesn't matter if it's an autoimmune disease that's incredibly uncommon or rare, they all have this commonality of genetics, environmental triggers, and the gut immune interface. And therefore, they all have a commonality that food could influence how they manifest.